Hi YouTube! I probably need to apologise at the beginning of this video before I do anything else because this is the first time I've sat in front of my laptop webcam and spoken to it probably since I last did a video on scoliosis for YouTube, which was December 2010. It is currently April 2018, so that's nearly 8 years. Anyway, the point of this video is because I've been recently reminded that I haven't really done a concluding video to my my sort of saga of videos through my scoliosis journey, or the journey to the operation I had on my back in 2010, and I feel that now is a good time to do that just because I've got a spare evening. I've been thinking about it for a while, and so this is just going to be my video where I talk through that. I have actually prepared a few things that I wanted to talk about because otherwise I knew that I was going to be stuck with, so do excuse me while I look down at my phone basically where I've made these notes. And I like that the first thing that I've noted is that I say way too much in all of my other scoliosis videos, which is very true, and I'm probably going to do it the same in this video. I find it very awkward watching myself on camera, so I haven't really watched those videos since I made them in 2010 until today. And one of the things I noticed is that I say a lot. I pause, I'm very hesitant, I don't think I'm particularly easy to listen to, so it really does amaze me that I've got over 3,000 views on my first scoliosis video. I don't know who you are, but well done for persevering through that very awkward monologue of mine earlier. So I'm going to try and edit out any ums there are here, or hopefully, being several years older and having got through university and a job, I really hope that I don't still speak like that anymore, so we will see. So it was basically to talk through the hospital experience because I think I did 2 videos post-op for you, and I don't think in either of them I really gave any tips or advice in the hospital. I sort of told you what I was doing that day or what I'd done that week, but I don't think I gave any real information. So I had a bit of time to think, and these are my top tips for anyone that is about to go into hospital for a scoliosis operation. And bear in mind, things may well have changed in the last 8 years. I can't believe it's been 8 years. But I think this advice is pretty timeless, to be honest. So the first thing I've recommended, and probably my biggest regret to date in terms of the operation, is that I didn't do a crab or a bridge in the hospital the night before the operation. I hope you all know what that means or what I'm talking about, but basically it's that I'm not going to, well, I can't, the point is I can't really do it now because I've got very straight back, so I can't arch it enough. Basically, you know that thing you used to do in gym on PE where you kind of, like, you're lying on the floor, put your hands behind your neck and your feet in the ground and you push up and you get that beautiful upside down arch shape. I thought about doing it the night before. I was like, I went into hospital the night before the operation, so you're perfectly well at that point, you're just in a hospital bed, and I did think about getting out of bed to do it, just one last time while I had full flexibility in my back, and for some reason I just remember thinking to myself that that would be a really silly, strange thing to do. I was in a room by myself as well, so there was not going to be anyone there judging me. Anyway, I decided not to do that, and the day after, well, pretty much from the day after the operation onwards, I wondered why I didn't do that. That was my last chance. I could have really immortalised my memory of doing the bridge or the crab or whatever you want to call it, and I didn't do that. So that is my number one tip. Stuff that you think you might not be able to do so well after, just do it one last time. Probably just me being weird, but if anyone wants to take me up on that tip, go for it. That was my top tip. I don't know what that says about me. Right. Next tip, make a good playlist. This is something I was told to do by a friend, in fact the friend I mentioned in one of my videos, and she told me to make a good playlist, and in fact I basically just completely copied her playlist. She said to me, and I use the same songs, so anything uplifting or fun or something that's going to get you back into high spirits and a good mood when you might not be feeling so great. Certainly in the first few days after the operation there's not much you can do, and listening to music is one of the things you can, and it will help. So my next point, which is another thing I was recommended by a friend who'd had an operation recently, is to pack a hospital bag, like just a mini travel bag of things that you want but you might not have thought of. So there's various things on this list: dry shampoo, Vaseline, moisturiser, hand sanitizer, snacks, earplugs in case you're in a, if you know you're going in NHS and you're in a big ward with lots of people, and if you're going to struggle sleeping, that might help. Also clothes that are easy to put on and take off. Obviously when you're there and you've just had the operation, you're not really able to do much movement yourself, and you're going to be asking people to help. And to be honest, I don't actually think I wore anything other than the hospital gowns when I was in hospital. So it's the clothes that I wanted to leave in really that were the important thing, but just make sure they're comfortable and very easy to get on and off when you don't really want to do too much movement because you've just had a major operation on your back. Coming out of hospital, we bought this weird bowl thing, kind of like what hairdressers have at the end of seats if you get your hair washed at hairdressers. I had that so that I could lie on a bed and someone could wash my hair off the edge of the bed. It was very bizarre. So that's probably a good thing to invest in if you're worried about wanting to wash your hair and not being able to shower. Right, what's next on the list? Oh yeah, this is something I didn't realise that they were going to do, but I found it interesting anyway. Just in a few hours before the operation, they actually come around and they give you some pills for anti-anxiety tablets or something. I don't feel like I was I was about to say I don't feel like I was giving off a particularly anxious or nervous vibe. That is definitely a lie. As I've admitted to in one of my previous videos, there was a whole roller coaster of emotions going on that day. So I probably was giving off the anxious vibe. And I nearly didn't want to take the pills because I kind of felt like I was cheating my brain. I kind of felt like if I took the pills and, internally I was actually terrified and wanted to feel all this nervousness, and I took some pills that calmed me down, that wouldn't mean that I wasn't calm. It would just mean that, my brain was fake calm because I'd taken these drugs. Not quite aware that. So I kind of didn't want to take them, but I did anyway. I think they helped. I don't really remember being completely panicked in the way to the operating theatre. Right. So the only other point I have on my list of things to tell you about in terms of the hospital visit, which may seem really weird, but it's enjoy the intensive care unit. And honestly, that was my favourite part of the whole thing. Waking up after the operation, firstly you get woken up straight out of the operating theatre, and that is basically, I think, to check that you're still talking and conscious and fine. All I was concerned about in that instance was whether or not I was still able to walk. You're surrounded by nurses and people prodding you and checking everything's okay, and all I wanted to know is whether I could walk, and I'm pretty sure that's all I was rabbiting on about. And to which they're like, yes, you're fine, can you feel your toes? Yeah, you're fine. And they probably got so annoyed with me that they immediately put me back to sleep, because I definitely fell back asleep at that point. And then you wake up in the intensive care unit, which is all hospitals I'm sure are different, and again this is on their NHS, the National Health Service in England, so this is probably going to be different if you're getting this done elsewhere around the world. But it's basically a giant ward where everyone is kind of in the critical stages after major operation or surgery or ill, and it's basically, you've got nurses and people around 24/7, just making sure that you're stabilised before you get moved to a proper ward. And it was great. I was on a morphine drip there, and so basically I was able to administer myself morphine every 5 minutes by the press of a button. And unfortunately they took that away from me within the first 12 hours. I'm pretty sure they thought I was going to get addicted to morphine basically. So you're really not in any pain at all. You're thoroughly relieved that the whole operation is over. Your family or friends can come visit. I mean, probably only your closest relatives, so only my parents came in at that point. But I remember the weird thing though is that because you've still got this sort of anaesthetic, the general anaesthetic in you, and you're being pumped with painkillers and all sorts. You do. I remember I definitely was speaking to my parents one minute and then fast asleep the next, and then you'd wake up and sort of think that no time had passed at all, but then they'd clearly have be talking amongst themselves because you'd clearly just fallen asleep midway through a conversation, which I found a bit weird, and they probably found quite weird as well. But so that's the only thing. You're very drowsy. But I remember I got some toast and jam. I don't really even like jam all that much, but I was just really excited to be being served food and that I was alive and well and not feeling too bad. So yeah, enjoying the intensive care unit, because then you get moved to, well, I got moved again to my own ward. I'm not sure why, because again, this was NHS, not private, but I was in my own little room, and it got very lonely, and that's when things started getting uncomfortable, because you know, you're coming off the super intense painkillers into only the mildly intense ones, and yeah, so enjoy intensive care while you're there is the short story for what I was trying to get to there. Right, so my next set of tips is for when you get home after the operation. So you already saw in one of my videos I had that weird litter picker thing, that weird yellow and black thing that you, that most people would use to pick up litter off the floor. That is really helpful when you'll come back, because you are not, as I've said, you're not allowed to like bend or twist your back. You may or may not be given a back brace like I was, but whether you have or haven't, you need to give your back time to meld itself together. So you should not be reaching down or doing any of that kind of stuff. So a litter picker meant that if you dropped anything or needed to reach something that you couldn't quite stretch to, you had the ability to get it without having to call someone over, which I found really quite useful. So the second thing, this is another weird one. Being turned in the night. You get very uncomfortable, or I got very uncomfortable in the middle of the night in the first probably couple of weeks after the operation, because you're lying in the middle of your back for a bit, and then it really, really hurts, and so you want to kind of lie on one side, and that's okay for a bit, but then it starts really hurting or aching again, and you want to lie on the other side. And because you've just not got the mobility or the move, you can't move yourself around in those first few weeks as you can normally. You really need it, or it's very helpful if you have someone that's able to kind of push you over, so you can almost kind of stay there and sit, and they can just roll you flat, so you're not bending your back or anything. So you probably, if you've got a brother or sister or boyfriend, girlfriend, like anyone that is not going to be too pissed off with you if you wake them up in the night and ask to be turned over. I think I just kept a phone by my bed with probably someone on speed dial. I'm pretty sure it rotated between my parents and my sisters during the first few nights, and so maybe a couple of times in the night I would then phone someone up and ask them to turn me over. And the other really useful thing is having, which they suggest actually in hospital, is to get extra pillows and have one pillow that you sleep with between both your legs. I don't know why they suggested that, but it does help. I don't know if that helps keep your sort of back aligned or stops you from twisting, but it did feel a bit more comfortable. And the other thing I found that felt a lot more comfortable was having a second pillow that you could sort of hug, but particularly when you're lying on your side, because it stops if you're lying this way. I can't believe I'm doing these weird demos on this video, but if you're lying on your side and then this arm kind of folds over, it pulls your back apart like a little bit, and so to keep that arm up and kind of your back straight, if you're hugging a pillow, it sort of keeps everything in line a bit more. I don't know if I've explained that well at all, probably not, but that would be my other tip, getting a few spare pillows that you can use. Right, so this is probably the most important point, and something I really should have driven home in my last few videos to you all. It is a painful operation, and when you wake up afterwards, and the painkillers have become toned down, and so probably from sort of day 3 onwards, it's not comfortable in the slightest. And I distinctly remember one of the clearest thoughts I remember having at some point when I was at home in that first week back was that it felt like I was never going to be comfortable again. I could not at that time picture myself feeling comfortable. My back felt like it got like some kind of lamppost shoved in it. It was, painful. I felt like I was going to be able to feel this for the rest of my life, and that I didn't know how I was going to cope. That feeling, if you're unlucky enough to have that feeling after the operation, will pass, and it will pass quickly. As I will go on to at the end of this video, I do not feel like this has impacted my life in the slightest at all. I don't feel like there's anything that I can't do or anything that I haven't been able to do other than in those first few months after the operation. So if that's something if you watch this video, have the operation, and then you get out of hospital and you have that feeling that you're just never going to feel like you can sit in a chair or lie in bed and relax again, that feeling will go, I promise you. Something that I remember seeing on someone else's YouTube video, I think, when I was preparing for this operation, was not to view the time post-op in days, but rather view it in weeks. Instead of, saying, oh, my back feels a lot worse than it did yesterday, I'm clearly not healing, how is that, I'm never going to feel better. Look at it in terms of weeks, and I found that really helped for me, because some days you will be feeling okay, and then maybe the next day you'll be feeling rubbish and your back just hurts again, and then the next day it's kind of okay, but then the next day, but certainly if you look at it in terms of weeks, so if you had the operation done on a Tuesday and then you have this up and down, but the following Tuesday you'll be amazed at firstly what you're doing, and actually you'll remember, oh yeah, the pain is a lot less this week, or I am able to do a lot more, and then the following Tuesday again it'll be even clearer. So definitely view time in terms of weeks and not days. I'm sure that's probably true for any operation you have, that the body does its own healing process, and it is healing. It might not feel like it day to day or hour to hour, but oh yeah, have something ready to do at home when you get back. For me, it was basically just box sets. Probably now I might be more into reading books, but certainly all I wanted to do then was sit back and just lose myself in something else. So for me, it was One Tree Hill. I'd never seen One Tree Hill before, and I got through the entire, whatever it is, eight seasons, however many seasons One Tree Hill is. I watched the whole thing over a period of several weeks, and it got me through. And also, One Tree Hill is great, so that was a win-win situation for me. But yeah, get some books, some films lined up, box sets, just something that distracts yourself from the healing process, and you're able to enjoy. Oh, the only other point I have for when you get back from hospital to know is that it was really difficult getting in and out of the car. I think I also might have mentioned this in one of my other videos. It is really awkward. You kind of feel, because you feel like you're wearing a straitjacket, because you're stiff and your back's obviously gone through hell. You kind of have to get your head in first, and it probably doesn't help. I'm quite tall anyway, so for shorter people out there, probably this isn't going to be a problem. But I really felt like I was having to prise myself into the car really carefully. It felt really odd. That feeling as well goes away quite quickly. So I think that's that for basically all the tips I could think of. I'm sure I've forgotten loads, but that's what comes from me leaving this to 7 or 8 years after the event. So the final thing I was going to talk about is what I've done since the operation. So as you can see, a lot older, hopefully a lot wiser. But as I said earlier, absolutely do not feel like this has impacted my life negatively at all. I've had many positives. So went to uni a year later, made some great uni friends, which I'd never have met if I'd gone the year before. So I'm definitely a big believer that everything happens for a reason. And so I was skiing after 1.5 years after the operation. I went skiing for the first time post-op. That was fine, felt totally normal. I remember being delighted that I could still ski. So that was that. I know I was terribly worried I wouldn't be able to do a London marathon, well, do any marathon. I can probably say that, I feel like I would be able to do a marathon if I put my mind to it, as in the same way that anyone might be able to. I haven't really put my mind to it, and I don't really feel like I want to. But if you're someone that is about to have a scoliosis operation and is devastated because they've told you you won't ever be able to run a marathon, I would take that with a pinch of salt. You probably shouldn't be doing too much long distance running all of the time, just for the reason that it is going to dry your back. In the same way, it ruins people's knees. So the human body has its limitations when it comes to that sort of thing. But I've gone on plenty of runs, and I've done 10Ks, 5Ks, and I've never had a problem with running, at all. So I think that's not something you need to worry about. The other thing they said not to do was bungee jumping. To be quite honest, I don't actually have any interest in bungee jumping. What I did have an interest in, or I clearly grew an interest in doing it following that video, was going skydiving. And I can tell you that I have been skydiving. So I wrote to my surgeon, so nearly 1.5 years ago now, but I wrote to my surgeon before, and I said I'd had no problems with my back. I know that he'd advised against bungee jumping and skydiving and that sort of thing, but would it be okay if I did it? just once. And he sort of wrote back saying, as long as the landing's not hard, he couldn't see why it'd be a problem. I was travelling through Australia with my sister, and decided that I wanted to jump out of a plane over Byron Bay, and that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I cannot explain to you the feeling of jumping out of a plane. It was absolutely phenomenal. Honestly, I would recommend it to anyone, regardless of whether or not you're scared of heights, and I happen to be quite lucky, not scared of heights, but I did used to be terrified of roller coasters, and I really don't enjoy the feeling of falling. But I would recommend jumping out of a plane, and I will show you the video at the end of this video, or some excerpt of the video, to prove that I did do it, and that was me doing that post scoliosis operation. Oh, and I've also got another video that I've also decided I'll add onto this video, just to show sort of that you still do have some flexibility. I mean, I just had my back, the word fused. I've had my back fused from the very top to somewhere down the thoracic region. So the lumbar part of my back, which is the lower part of your back, and it is actually responsible for most of your back movement. Mine is still flexible, but I'm going to show you a video just to show that even when the top of your back is fused completely straight, you can still do kind of cool stuff. So for me, that was on a holiday with friends in Portugal, doing a handstand into a swimming pool. So you can still do that, so it's fine. Yeah, so there's one final point actually that I did want to mention. So I've probably done this in a really weird order. I may have to do some chopping and changing again if I can be bothered. So after following my operation, they, instead of giving me stitches or stapling it together, they did what's called like steri stripping, which I don't really know what it is, but in my mind I'm pretty sure it's almost just like tiny bits of masking tape or sort of sellotape-esque that kind of dissolve after time, but so they just kind of stuck it together down. I don't know if that's the normal procedure, or if they still do that, or why they did that. It didn't really keep my scar, my back, like fully together in the healing process, which sounds a bit weird and a bit gross. And I probably don't have any photos to show you because I was extremely self-conscious of it at the time. But basically, what happened, so the bottom part of my back healed perfectly fine. Very narrow, thin, you can barely notice it after sort of a couple of years. Well, even after a year. And the top part of my back, which is obviously where you've got a lot of the movement, your arms stretch the top of your back when they move. The scar split. It sounds gross. It is a bit gross. I don't really know what it means. It's still healed, so it's not. Don't go getting any ideas that I had an open wound on my back. I didn't. But the scar just got really wide, and it was just this disgusting, like a jelly feeling thing down the middle of the top of my back. Which I found absolutely gross. I hated the feel of it, I hated the sight of it. So luckily, our wonderful NHS were able to do a corrective, effectively plastic surgery operation on it. So I didn't have to pay anything, luckily, and I don't know if that would still be the case now, but they corrected it. So I had that a year later, so my first year at university, and I was at the end of my first year of university actually, so I think it was just before I started in second year, so it must have been summer 2012. I went in and they basically cut out the top bit of the scar that had gone like that, and then they did stitches. So they did what's called deep suturing, so they did a kind of a level of stitches underneath the skin to keep, I guess, more of the muscle together. Sounds a bit gross. And then they did a more superficial level on top again. And that's healed fine. I can I'll show you photos of what it looks like now. My final tip, which I just thought of, is that you should take photos before and after. I did, and I've since lost them, which is really annoying. So I do actually have copies of them in a scrapbook I made, thankfully. So I'll include photos of those at the end, but I'm afraid they're going to be photos of photos because I have no idea what I did with the original copies of those pictures, which is really annoying. But do that because you will be interested in it, whether 6 months down when you're comparing how the scar's healing, or whether 7 years later when you can't remember at all what it looked like before. Right, I'm gonna definitely sign off now because this video has just reached half an hour. I can't believe I've been talking into a camera to myself for that long, and that's not even with the bits I was going to add on with the photos and videos. So I'm definitely going to stop this now. For anyone that's stuck with me through all of this video and through all of my previous videos, thank you. If you're watching this because you've got a scoliosis operation coming up, good luck. I know I say that in all my videos. If you want to contact me though, drop me a message, through YouTube or whatever. Really happy to answer questions. Even though my operation was a while ago, I would be delighted to hear from people. So yeah, right, bye.